As we move into the early months of 2026, alarm bells seem to be ringing loudly in one of the planet's most critical arteries. The Strait of Hormuz once again appears to be becoming the focal point of a global energy paralysis. It is ironic that the prosperity of the entire world, and perhaps even the stability of your own wallet, seems to depend excessively on a single narrow point on the map. A strip of water where 20% of the world's oil is forced to squeeze through every day. But amid that suffocating atmosphere, the United Arab Emirates appears to be betting everything on a $3.3 billion escape route, the Habshan-Fujairah pipeline. The question here, and perhaps what tycoons in Dubai are anxiously worrying about, is whether this steel shield is truly strong enough to protect their economy from the risk of collapse, or whether it all seems to be just an expensive attempt to buy a false sense of security. Let's take a deeper look into the heart of the desert, where billion-dollar pipelines seem to be carrying a mission beyond their real capacity. Looking at the map, the Strait of Hormuz seems like a strange mistake of nature. Connecting the Persian Gulf to the Indian Ocean, this bottleneck at its narrowest point is only about 21 miles wide. But don't let that number fool you. In reality, the safe shipping lane for supertankers, or VLCCs for short, seems to be only about 2 miles in each direction. Steering a vessel carrying millions of barrels of oil through here may feel like trying to drive a school bus through a narrow alley while people stand on rooftops ready to throw rocks. With shallow waters and coral reefs, these giants of the sea seem to have no choice but to follow fixed routes. This effectively turns them into stationary targets, ideal for anyone looking to create a massive blaze at sea. With more than 150 ship transits per day in 2026, this no longer seems like a trade route, but more like a long, hopeless line at a broken toll booth during rush hour. There is a reality that Iran, a nation under numerous sanctions, appears to hold the key to global energy. With the longest coastline along the strait and strategic islands like Abu Musa and the Tums, Tehran does not seem to need a massive fleet to cause trouble. Instead of a direct confrontation like those often seen in 1980s Hollywood films, they appear to favor asymmetric tactics that are cheap but frustratingly effective. A few outdated naval mines, armored speedboats racing like maniacs, or low-cost suicide drones, that seems to be more than enough to give naval admirals a headache. The so-called strait closure tactic appears to be a political bargaining chip they place on the table whenever they want the West to back down, and it is uncomfortable to admit that the dependence of the U.S., China, or India on this oil flow seems to have turned all of us into unwilling hostages. Have you ever heard of the 1973 oil crisis? Long lines of people waiting for gasoline seem ready to return. According to data from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas in early 2026, a serious incident at Hormuz appears likely to create a supply shock 3 to 5 times greater than anything we have seen in the past. But the cost does not stop at the gas station. Look at war risk insurance premiums. They seem to have surged 10, even 25 times in just the past few days. When a single voyage must carry an additional $250,000 in insurance costs, you can probably guess who ultimately pays that bill. All of us. This instability seems to be creating a brutal domino effect. Rising oil prices drive up fertilizer costs, and then the price of the steak on your table will not be the same anymore. Financial markets appear to be panicking, pushing investors into safe havens, tightening credit, and directly threatening the value of the retirement funds you have spent a lifetime saving. By common sense in a life or death game, having only one escape route is no different from putting a noose around your own neck. That may be why the Arab Emirates, who seem to have grown tired of being trapped at the Strait of Hormuz, decided to spend $3.3 billion to build an emergency exit through the desert. We are talking about ADCOP, also known as the Habshan-Fujairah pipeline. It seems that leaders in Abu Dhabi realized a bitter truth long ago. Allowing 100% of the nation's lifeline to pass through the mouth of the bag at Hormuz is a gamble they cannot keep winning forever. The goal of this pipeline appears to be not just transportation, but to strip away Iran's naval trump card. By sending oil out the back door directly to the Indian Ocean, the United Arab Emirates seems to be trying to position itself as a rare island of stability in the Gulf's ocean of uncertainty. For major customers who appear fed up with soaring shipping insurance premiums every time someone in Tehran issues a threat, a country with an independent export route may not be a bad option. After all, $3.3 billion seems like a reasonable price to buy the right to ignore those standing guard at Hormuz, at least in theory. Have you ever had to sit outside fixing your car under the blazing heat of an American summer? If so, you might understand the cost of maintaining a massive mechanical system in the desert. ADCOP does not seem to be just a simple 4-8-inch steel pipe. It appears to be an impressive engineering achievement. Stretching about 230 miles, the system seems capable of transporting up to 1.5 million barrels of oil per day, and even pushing itself to 1.8 million barrels in emergencies. More notably, it appears to have been equipped with a nervous system of fiber optics running along its entire length. This technology may allow operators to detect even the smallest vibrations, from a leak to someone attempting to drill illegally. Combined with a network of high-pressure pumping stations and massive storage facilities in Fujairah, the pipeline seems ready to operate even when upstream oil fields encounter trouble. A system that appears highly sophisticated, very much like the kind of expensive toy favored by wealthy Arab elites. But clearly, building a pipeline through the desert is never like a walk in the park. Engineers had to face a real battle against nature. First is the extreme heat, often exceeding 50 degrees Celsius, where metal seems to want to melt, and sand is always ready to swallow everything. The real challenge may lie in the Hajar Mountains, a towering wall of rock separating oil from the sea. To move millions of tons of crude across these elevations, engineers seem to have had to solve the most difficult hydraulic problems, pushing oil uphill and controlling the immense pressure as it flows downhill toward the port. Blasting through rock and constructing pipelines across steep ravines likely required absolute precision. Even a small miscalculation in pressure could turn this billion-dollar system into a ticking time bomb. Even so, despite having its own logistics route and rapid response capabilities, one cannot help but wonder, is a long strip of steel in the wilderness truly safe, or is it simply shifting the target from the sea onto land, giving saboteurs more options? What do you think? Let us know below. We all know that Abu Dhabi holds about 94% of the UAE's oil reserves, while Dubai seems to have only a small amount left for display. But as you might guess, Dubai's glamorous appearance did not come out of nowhere. Even though it talks a lot about tourism and real estate, the federal budget and emergency bailout funds still seem to flow from Abu Dhabi's petrodollar wallet. When the Strait of Hormuz is threatened in April 2026, ADCOP appears to have become the lender of last resort. If the oil flow through this pipeline is disrupted, the massive cash flow used to guarantee state-owned corporations and megaprojects in Dubai may evaporate faster than water in the desert. In other words, ADCOP seems to be the only rope keeping the Dubai ship from drifting when the entire Gulf is in turmoil. Dubai is the region's financial center, but international investors seem to run first, ask questions later, whenever they hear gunfire at Hormuz. Keeping ADCOP operational appears to send a steel-strong message to the financial world. The UAE can still do business despite conflict. Without this bypass, the UAE's credit rating might have been downgraded long ago, and a massive capital flight from Dubai's real estate market would likely be unavoidable. ADCOP seems to be quietly protecting the value of the dirham, which is pegged to the US dollar, and ensuring that foreign investors' assets here do not turn into scrap paper overnight. There is a reality that Jebel Ali, Port Dubai's pride, and the largest container port in the region, lies deep inside the trap of Hormuz. If the strait were completely blocked, Jebel Ali would seem to become an abandoned parking lot for ships. At that point, ADCOP and Fujairah appear to act as a pressure release valve. By pushing oil out through Fujairah, the UAE seems to free up space and valuable military resources to focus on protecting ships carrying food and essential goods into Dubai. For a city like Dubai, which consumes extremely high levels of energy and fresh water from desalination plants, even a small disruption in energy supply could be enough to turn 7-star hotels into giant ovens and cause the tourism industry to collapse immediately. Perhaps ADCOP is the first brick in an ambitious Look East strategy. By connecting this pipeline to the gradually developing Etihad rail system, Dubai seems to be trying to find a permanent outlet to the Indian Ocean. It appears they want to protect their service-based economic model from political fluctuations to the west. But can a pipeline and a few railway lines truly replace an entire natural strait? That may be for you to decide. Fujairah currently holds one of the largest crude oil storage capacities on the planet. With capacity seemingly exceeding 70 million barrels, this place is no different from a giant backup battery. When giants like Vopak and ADNOC pour money into it, they appear to be buying an insurance policy for the world. Its location outside the Strait of Hormuz seems to have turned Fujairah into an almost unbelievable safe buffer. Even if the ADCOP pipeline runs into trouble or oil fields are attacked, oil flows from these storage tanks seem able to maintain exports for weeks. And it is ironic that a small town now appears to be competing with Singapore and Rotterdam to become the world's third largest marine fuel supply hub. It seems that the wealth of the Emirates can truly move mountains, or at least move an entire energy hub out of a danger zone. For those of us who like machinery and ships, the offshore loading technology, SPM, at Fujairah seems to be a masterpiece of practicality. Very large crude carriers, VLCCs, those 300,000-ton monsters you might only see in documentaries now seem to no longer need to squeeze through the narrow gate of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf. They can simply anchor at offshore loading buoys in the deep waters of the Indian Ocean, a few miles from shore. This appears not only to save large amounts of fuel and time, but more importantly, it seems to eliminate the risk of being trapped in the geographic mousetrap guarded by Iran. The ability for ships to evacuate quickly when security alerts arise seems to be an advantage every ship owner would desire in the unstable context of 2026. From here, you can probably imagine that Dubai, with all its glamour, might not be able to hold up without its quiet sibling, Fujairah. When ports inside the strait like Jebel Ali Port face sky-high insurance premiums, Fujairah seems to become a critical transshipment lifeline. Goods, food, and construction materials, the things that sustain Dubai's mega-projects, appear to be offloaded here and then moved inland via roads or the Etihad rail system. Fujairah no longer seems to be just a stopover, but a true economic counterweight, helping the UAE maintain GDP when Western trade hubs are under threat. It seems that while the world focuses on the towers of Dubai, the real strength lies in the rough crude oil tanks of Fujairah. Finally, in 2026, Fujairah appears to be guarded not only by engineers but also by fleets. The presence of a French naval base and close coordination with the United States Navy seem to have turned it into an almost impenetrable fortress. Fujairah's position may no longer be measured in barrels, but in deterrence capability. Building an energy hub right next to the Indian Ocean seems to be a quiet message to Tehran. We have an exit. In this geopolitical chess game, the UAE appears to have made a very sharp move, even if the price seems to be increasing dependence on Western protection, a trade-off that seems inevitable, yet ironic for a nation that always seeks autonomy. Look at what happened in Fujairah this past March. A few low-cost suicide drones, a few low-flying cruise missiles slipping through mountain gaps. That seems to have been enough to set massive oil storage tanks ablaze. The way adversaries use proxy forces to wage gray zone warfare appears to be a highly insidious psychological tactic. They no longer seem to need to block ships at sea. Instead, they focus on paralyzing oil receiving and processing points on land. Assigning responsibility becomes nearly impossible in this chaos, and as a result, insurance companies highly sensitive to the smell of gunpowder have begun imposing war risk premiums, even on Fujairah port. It seems our wallets may once again have to bear another unreasonable cost because of these endless conflicts. The ADCOP pipeline, despite all expectations, seems capable of handling at most 1.8 million barrels per day. Meanwhile, the normal flow through the chokepoint of Hormuz exceeds 20 million barrels. As you can see, that is not even 10%. So while the UAE might be able to save its own finances for a short time, in terms of rescuing global supply disruptions and keeping gasoline prices in the US from soaring to unimaginable levels, ADCOP seems to be only a temporary painkiller. When neighbors like Saudi Arabia also rush to divert oil through alternative routes, infrastructure in Fujairah seems to be falling into severe overload. It appears that a small lifeboat is not enough for a sinking ship. And it does not take much to realize that a 230-mile steel pipeline running exposed across the desert is an ideal stationary target. In the era of precision weapons and modified civilian drones, protecting every meter of pipeline from small sabotage groups seems nearly impossible, or at least extremely costly. Just one damaged pumping station or a blown section of pipe could completely halt the flow of millions of barrels per day for days, even weeks, during repairs. The cost of monitoring this long steel bracelet 24/7 against threats from above appears to be an enormous financial burden. This insecurity seems to be directly priced into every barrel of oil. As the UAE invests billions of dollars in missile defense systems like Patriot Missile System or THAAD to protect the pipeline, while insurance costs keep rising, its oil seems to be losing its competitive edge. Do you notice something strange? We spend billions of dollars building alternative routes in search of safety, only to realize that the cost of protecting those routes may be enough to bankrupt us. A bitter cycle that perhaps only those sitting in air-conditioned rooms in Abu Dhabi can remain optimistic about. As for us, watching our wallets shrink, it all seems to be unfolding exactly along the worst-case scenario we once feared. It seems we are entering a new chapter, where simply building a $3.3 billion oil pipeline is no longer enough. To keep that flow from being disrupted, the UAE appears to be pouring billions more into a multi-layered iron dome. But ask yourself, does the cost of this resilience seem to be becoming too expensive for what it actually delivers? Some viewers here may find it familiar to hear names like THAAD or Patriot missile system, the pride of American military engineering. In Fujairah today, these systems seem to be operating at full capacity to intercept threats from above. While THAAD appears to handle the clearing of medium-range ballistic missiles at a distance, Patriot acts as a low-altitude bodyguard, directly protecting valuable oil storage clusters. However, the biggest threat in 2026 does not seem to be million-dollar missiles, but swarms of low-cost drones. To deal with these annoying mosquitoes, high-energy laser systems and electronic suppression measures appear to be deployed. It seems we are using a priceless sword to swat flies, and the cost of maintaining coordination between the United States Fifth Fleet and the French Navy here appears to be turning each barrel of oil into a luxury item. Building the ADCOP pipeline seems to provide only redundancy, that is, giving us an additional route, but that route does not seem capable of protecting itself. True resilience appears to lie in how many strikes the system can withstand before collapsing. The United Arab Emirates seems to be trying to build a rapid recovery strategy, pre-positioning pipeline segments and fast response engineering teams along the 230-mile route. They appear confident they can isolate damaged sections and restore flow within 48 hours. However, constantly remaining in a waiting to be attacked posture in order to repair damage seems like a rather exhausting and costly approach, doesn't it? And that is not all. We are pouring billions of dollars into oil infrastructure in 2026, while the world outside seems to be rushing toward electric vehicles and renewable energy. You may also be wondering, will ADCOP recover its investment before oil becomes outdated, a relic of the last century? There appears to be talk of repurposing this pipeline to transport green hydrogen or ammonia in the future. That sounds like a smart backup plan, but it may also simply be an effort to reassure investors that the initial $3.3 billion will not turn into a stranded asset, or, to put it plainly, a pile of rusting scrap metal in the desert. In the end, there is a trade-off that perhaps no amount of money can measure: the UAE's complete reliance on the protective shield of the US. And France, to secure its oil flows, seems to place it in a delicate diplomatic position. It appears that the cost of maintaining the pipeline's resilience is not just cash, but also political concessions and questions of sovereignty. Every barrel of oil flowing through Fujairah seems to carry a massive security surcharge. And when looking at that bill, we have reason to question: is this plan to bypass the Strait of Hormuz truly a brilliant move? Or does it seem to be just a more expensive way to buy a little extra time in a world that is gradually changing? Perhaps the real answer still lies somewhere behind the drone smoke over the skies of Fujairah. Perhaps it is time to look at the core of the issue. This $3.3 billion oil pipeline was never really a magic wand capable of fully solving the Hormuz problem. However, its very existence seems to have saved the UAE, and especially Dubai, from an immediate economic stroke when the strait is choked. The biggest lesson here does not seem to lie in steel or concrete, but in a harsh truth of global trade. Risk never truly disappears. It seems we are merely shifting risk from one form to another, from violent waves offshore into the sun-scorched desert. The success, or perhaps survival, of Dubai and the UAE in 2026 no longer seems to depend entirely on oil reserves underground. Instead, it appears to lie in the ability to anticipate worst-case scenarios and the courage to build escape routes decades before disaster actually strikes. But we have a few questions for you. When you look at gasoline prices at stations near your home today, do you believe these distant pipelines are truly protecting our wallets? Or does it all seem like a futile effort to delay an unavoidable global energy crisis? How much more would you be willing to pay per gallon of gas in exchange for this fragile stability? Let us hear your thoughts below. One last note. This video is not intended to predict the future, but rather to provide a different perspective on existing geopolitical risks. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing is not what is about to happen, but rather what we believe will never happen. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next videos.